NASCAR not changing the rules for what Christopher Bell did. The Wood brothers have a really special scheme, and once again, Ricky Stenhouse Jr. is sponsored by a huge star, so let's get into it. Coming up next. What's going on, everybody? Hope you're doing good today. All right, NASCAR announced today that they don't see any changes in the future to the pit lane situation that was caused by Christopher Bell. For those unfamiliar with what I'm talking about, Christopher Bell had a loose wheel after a pit stop. He went down pit lane, then pulled into another Joe Gibbs Racing pit stall where they tightened up the wheel, then pulled back out onto the racetrack, and it caused quite a stir within some people in the NASCAR community. Some people absolutely did not like it. He was penalized, but they didn't think that the penalty was fitting of the crime. They thought he should have been penalized more. We're going to get into that in just a minute as well, but let's take a look at what NASCAR had to say. This is from NASCAR.com and Nate Ryan. NASCAR Managing Director of Racing Communications Mike Ford said in the latest episode of Hauler Talk podcast that the unusual maneuver would remain allowed because of its safety implications. In our view, a tire coming off the car is a very dangerous situation, Ford said. That's something we take very seriously. I think that there's the allowance, the acceptance of what the 20 team did, and really the applauding of what the 20 team did comes in, because if what they did was to avoid that dangerous situation, we're okay with it to a certain point. So he's saying what they did in the overall grand scheme of things is a good thing, because obviously if that tire comes off, there's potential for it to go off into the stands or go up into the catch fence, cause a ton of damage. It could roll off on pit road, take out a pit crew member. Any number of things with a loose tire going that rate of speed could happen. It's just a very bad situation. So he is going to go with the veil of safety. And although I don't think that's 100% why they're not going to amend or adjust this rule, I do think that whenever they go with the veil of safety, it's hard to argue against it, because if you argue against they're doing this because they think it's safer, you're just going to look like an absolute jerk. That being said, NASCAR does hide behind the veil of safety very often, but I don't necessarily think that this is one of those cases. It does seem logical that if you know the tire's loose, pull into the pits, let another pit team, pit crew, in this particular situation, a teammate, tighten up that wheel, so it's not a situation when you go back onto the racetrack. Does sort of check all the boxes there for it to be a safety issue. And just so we're clear, there's already a penalty for pitting outside of your pit box, and that is what he was penalized for. As the article continued, they talked about that. Bell's team was penalized for pitting outside the box and sent to the back for a restart. The punishment for pitting outside the box was reduced before the 2024 season from a one-lap penalty, and Ford said NASCAR could adjust the penalty again if concerns were raised about teams abusing the practice of stopping in another stall. The concern is the unintended consequences, Ford said. I don't think it's as much a loose tire or tightening that up. We're always going to be okay with that. More so, it comes down to the 20 leaves the box, the tires are all fine, but the gas man didn't pack it full of fuel. Is the 20 going to be allowed to stop in the 19 pit box and top it off? So there you go, the penalty was in place, and before this season started, they decided to reduce that penalty. However, this brought into question some other things. Obviously, they said if what Christopher Bell did is okay. However, if something outside of what Christopher Bell did ever happened, and he mentioned the topping off for fuel, like if he drove down to the 19 team and topped off for fuel, that would be a completely different situation. And in a situation like that, they might amend the rule or give a stiffer penalty, or might need to look at giving a stiffer penalty in the future, because I think he would lean toward more of that a performance advantage at that point, as opposed to just trying to avoid losing a crew member, or trying to keep it as safe as possible by keeping the tire on the car so it doesn't go off and hit somebody. So not sure if I explained that well, but one would be a safety issue, one would be a performance advantage. And so therein lies your overall argument. If it's done for safety, should they go to the back of the pack? If it's done for a performance advantage, should they lose the one lap? If the rule gets amended at all, I think it would be amended for that. But if they amended it for that, I do think that what Christopher Bell would still just be going to the back of the pack, the back of the longest line in that situation. So either way, what Christopher Bell did is not going to change. And that's what Mike Ford would go on to say later in this article. That is a little bit different in our opinion. That's the discussion we're having now. Do we need to look a little bit deeper to say, okay, this is not really in the spirit of the rule. Safety is one thing, a competitive advantage is another. So that's really the conversation we'll continue to have. But going into Homestead, no changes to the rule, but somewhere in the future, potentially. So there you go. If they change it, it will probably just be to differentiate between a safety violation versus a performance advantage. So maybe the performance advantage would get the 1-lap penalty and the safety advantage would just be end of the longest line. But either way, no changes for Miami this coming up weekend. So if your tire's loose, just go ahead and stop in anybody's stall and get it tightened up. And to me, it was never a big deal to me at all anyway, going to the end of the longest line. Seemed like a fair penalty because he didn't gain any advantage. Like getting your tire tightened up, the only advantage you're going to gain from that is not losing a crew member the next couple of weeks or whatever the rule is currently right now for losing a wheel. So, that would be the only advantage going forward. And we've seen teams lose crew members and they haven't really fallen off a cliff. So I don't know necessarily that this was as big a deal as everybody made it out to be, but some people were certainly fired up about this. I wasn't one of them, but I tried to talk about it as accurately and as in-depth as I could get here. All right, you see that? Last week's winner is going to be looking really sharp at Darlington. Wood Brothers going with this throwback right here. Wood Brothers Racing and driver Josh Berry are set to honor a landmark moment in the team's history with a special throwback paint scheme for the upcoming Goodyear 400 at Darlington. The official throwback weekend of NASCAR, the number 21 Ford Mustang will don a design inspired by Jim Clark's iconic Ford-powered Lotus, which clinched victory at the 1965 Indianapolis 500, a win significantly bolstered by the Wood Brothers' innovative pit stop strategies. So there you go, for those who didn't know, because I'd heard the stories, but I'd actually forgotten about it, and that was the actual car. I'd seen that car before, but I didn't know that was the one that the Wood Brothers did the pit strategy for in the Indianapolis 500 that ended up winning it. So really cool strategy, or really cool deal that the Wood Brothers came up with the pit strategy and were instrumental in helping them win that 500. And even though it's not red and white, a traditional Wood Brothers paint scheme, it kind of fits in because it does have that Wood Brothers history to it. However, Darlington actually plays into this a little bit too, as the article would go on to talk about. That connection dates back to an unexpected conversation at Darlington Raceway, the very track where this tribute will take center stage. During a NASCAR race in the mid-1960s, Ford Motor Company racing official John Cowley approached Glenn Wood with a proposition that took him by surprise, assisting with pit stops for Clark and the Lotus team in 1965 Indianapolis 500. When we were asked by Ford Motor Company to pit Jim Clark's car for the Indy 500 in a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, our family, said Leonard Wood, we were just a group of guys from Stewart, Virginia, working on stock cars, and suddenly we were part of something that would become a unique part of our history. To see that same scheme now on our number 21 Ford Mustang for Throwback Weekend at Darlington is really special. It brings back a lot of memories, and it's a great way to honor that moment. So if you really think about it, crazy as it sounds, when somebody just walked up to a NASCAR team and said, hey, we want you to help pit Indy cars, and that Indy car ends up winning the Indianapolis 500, and they had that conversation at Darlington, and then fast forward a whole bunch of years later, and NASCAR starts doing a throwback race at Darlington, and now you have that paint scheme on a Wood Brothers car at a throwback race in Darlington. It all kind of comes full circle. Real life, crazier than fiction sometimes, and that's kind of what this one reminds me of. However, that's not the only sponsor news today. You see the number 47 Better, obviously getting some plugs in for March Madness here. This from Hyak Motorsports press release. Ricky Stenhouse Jr. welcomes a new sponsor this weekend at Homestead with Better, founded in 2022 by Joey Levy and Jake Paul. Better is a leading sports gaming and media company focused on enhancing the consumption of sports through entertainment. Better's gaming products are differentiated through a unique product experience with simplified user interface that is catered to the casual sports fan, enabling Better to capture more of the under-penetrated online gaming addressable market. Despite launching only a year and a half ago, Better Picks already has hundreds of thousands of paying users and is one of the fastest growing products in the industry. Better's media division, Better Media, is one of the fastest growing sports betting media brands in the United States that has grown over 8.7 million followers, 6 billion impressions, and over 300 million engagements across its social media channels since launch. Better Media is able to effectively reach and engage its audience at scale, given its large social following and emphasis on talent-led, short-form original content. So there you go. Last week, Ricky Stenhouse Jr. had Hulk Hogan sponsoring his car. This week, he had Jake Paul. Jake Paul obviously had that fight with Mike Tyson where everybody had to watch it the next day on Netflix, because when you were watching it live on Netflix, it kept freezing up or whatever. So there you go. Jake Paul, super famous as well. Last week it was Hulk Hogan. Just really interesting partners here for the 47 so far this season. Some really big names in media. And there you go. Better on the side of the car for him this weekend. Welcome to the Ricky Stenhouse Jr. Sponsor News Channel. But wait, we're not done. Progressive going to sponsor Denny Hamlin for several races this season, 18, including this weekend at Miami. And you see the petty blue on the car, number 11, Progressive. Good looking car, I think. B, the moderator did mention it does look like Chase Elliott's prime car. So there is that for the Chase Elliott fans. It is similar to that prime car. But here is a list of all the events that he will have Progressive on the side of the car. Aside from Miami, he'll be at Martinsville with it. Bristol, Talladega, Texas, Kansas, the All-Star Race, Nashville Superspeedway, Pocono, Chicago, Dover, Indianapolis, Watkins Glen, Richmond, Worldwide Technology, New Hampshire, Charlotte Motor Speedway, the Roval, Phoenix, and in addition, Progressive will also be a full-time associate sponsor with Hamlin and the number 11 team. So there you go, Denny Hamlin, Joe Gibbs Racing fan. Your worries are over. Full-time sponsor over there for the 11 car. So, step away from the ledge. Everything is okay in 11 land, in Toyota land. That'll definitely help them out for the rest of the season, though. They don't have to worry about chasing down sponsors and things like that. So good deal for them over there. All right, that's all I got for you on this one. If you made it this far, would love to have your subscription. If not, I'll just keep making these things. If you're already subscribed, you know I appreciate you all as well. That's all I got for this one. See you on the next one. Peace.